Well, hello YouTube, it's me Fortmaster, and welcome to another Spooky Dude reaction, and this is Deltarune, analyzing massive new theories, Deltarune 3 and 4 discussion and analysis. So I'm fairly certain this isn't going to be one of those videos where Spooky Dude reviews a bunch of theories that the community has sent in. Either way, I don't think the theories I sent in are going to be able to, actually apply anymore, since literally all of them are hopelessly out of date now, unfortunately. But honestly, with chapters 3 and 4 and a couple of the newer videos that I've watched, new ideas have begun percolating, so hopefully maybe I'll have some more that I can send to him, or maybe even make a video about, who knows. Honestly, I have no idea what this one's going to be about, so I don't think this video is going to be about, a singular giant overarching theory. I'm going to hazard a guess and say most likely it's going to be Spooky Dude just shooting out, a bunch of ideas or observations that, they had from chapters 3 and 4. Though honestly, again, anything's possible of this, and yeah, I want to see them. So yeah, really don't have that much to say on this, so, let's actually get into this video. So of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video, lead to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because almost 3/4 of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I'd very much like that to change, just so I'd be that much closer to hitting my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
I can't believe it's been nearly a month since Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 released. I remember when the chapters first came out feeling absolutely gobsmacked by the revelations in just the first 15 minutes of chapter 3.
Oh, yeah.
There's a sort of, tonal dissonance between the first two chapters and these, with chapters 1 and 2 being so formulaic, chapters 3 and 4 completely subverting all expectations while also starting to get into much darker territory story-wise, made it feel like it was almost a completely different game. With the chapters now out and our first few theories out there, I think there's no better time to look towards the future. The next year, specifically. Just like how there were a handful of big theories after Chapter 2 that lasted until the release of 3 and 4, like Chris Knight, chess theory, and the many, many, many now debunked secret boss theories, there are plenty of theories just budding that seem to be taking the community by storm. So
Woody's coming back from the dead. Woody may appear in Chapter 5 still.
Today, I'd like to talk about all the new biggest theories that are going around, and discuss whether or not they hold any merit. Keep in mind, this isn't an official theory review. I'd like to do a Chapter 3 and 4 theory review either next week or the week after, so if you'd like your theory to be included, please make sure to send it to spookydudetheories@gmail.com. My name is Spooky Dude, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's discuss. To start off, we need to address the obvious. The elephant, or deer, I guess, in the room. The Night. Chapter 3 introduced us to the Night. First, Tenna said the Night made the Chapter 3 Dark World, but he didn't just say it was the Night, he said it was the Roaring Night. Oh wow, I guess Chris is the Night, huh? Until then, he's ripped to pieces by
the Roaring Night.
Turns out that this is the Night, and it's got a skeletal, deer-like body with 2 antlers. Not only that, but later on in the chapters, in a little hidden Chapter 4 interaction, Chris can press their hands up against another figure's hand, which is presumably the Knight, considering it was the only other character in the Dark World at that time, and it plays a very subtle guitar sound. Not only that, but chapters 3 and 4 hammer home the fact that Noelle has a missing sister.
Okay, so I'd literally never heard of that secret before. How do you get to that one? And on top of that, again, like, I'm fairly certain... Honestly, like, originally I was very 50-50 whether the Knight was Des or Mayor Holiday. I'm tilting more heavily towards, Des being the Knight. But as Andrew Cunningham's most recent video pointed out, it doesn't seem like you have to only have Des or, Carol, because it very much seems like the Knight may very well, in fact, be working, like, with both Chris and Carol. And then there's some, like, external stragglers like Asgore and possibly Alvin who are part of the plan but not fully in the know, so to speak. It's again, watching that video kind of opened my eyes to just, oh man, this is getting a lot bigger than we thought it was.
The gumball machine's secret, the code in Chapter 3 being 1225, her literal bedroom being explored, and so much more. December is an official part of the story. Originally, I expected her to be sort of a counterpart to Gaster, whereas if Gaster is an antagonistic figure banished to the code, December is almost a sort of angelic figure who will assist us from the code. This is false. December is part of the main storyline, and seemingly the Night herself. So the first theory we need to talk about, December Holiday is the Night. It seems pretty straightforward, but it's obviously not that simple. You see, I don't actually think it's enough to just say it's December, because that makes no sense. December Holiday, loving sister to Noel, friend to Chris and Azriel, wouldn't go around kidnapping police officers or hurting kids to try and cause the end of the world. It's also worth mentioning the Night doesn't seem to work using the same logic that the other Lighteners do.
I've actually been coming up with a theory about this, and it's specifically that Des is the Night, but not all of Des. Like, I'm planning on making a full video about it at some point, but my personal theory with the Night right now is that, well, as, you know, Spooky Dude said, initially he thought that, you know, Des was going to be like sort of the good counterpart to Gaster. But what was Gaster? He fell into his creation and was split across all time and space. How do we know Des wasn't split apart as well? I mean, there are those unused lines that everybody assumes are Des literally trapped in the code. And I've seen some people suggest, like, oh, that was Des, you know, initially when she was down there, and then something happened to her, you know, to end up being the Night. But what if it's literally not? You know, the fact that maybe the Night is only Des's body, or, like, only a chunk of her or something? Mainly because, again, we've seen the Night's abilities. We've not seen a single Lightener with those types of abilities. But we've seen Darkners with these abilities, like being able to fly and change shape and stuff like that. And also, you know, there's the whole, you know, the skeletal aspect, which might point towards death in some way. So, again, I'm saying, I guess, again, so I'm saying that it's Des, it's just not all of Des is the thing.
It morphs its body into strange shapes, including what looks like a ball and a strange beaked bird thing, and it seems to be somewhat...
with antlers still, though!
Amorphous, I guess. Not only that, but if the Night is December, seeing that the Night takes Undyne to the bunker through the light world, does that mean that December is just... alive? In regular old Lightener form? When Chris and Susie leave the Dark World, they're in their normal outfits, their Light World outfits, because you stop being a cool fantasy hero the second you step back into reality. So the same would...
God, I mean, you don't have to be so... that sounds like so mean when you say it out loud like that.
Probably go for December, right? While we didn't technically see the Night in the Light World, it seems like, based on how fast it made it to the bunker, and how it was somehow able to physically overpower Undyne even outside the Dark World, it is the same form in both realities. What I'm getting at is, I don't think we can just say that it's December and call it a day. There's obviously some level of Gaster Shadow Crystal weirdness on top of all this.
Yeah.
There is technically an answer as to how the Night could exist in both realities. There are 3 instances in which we hear about an item called the Black Shard. First, Asgore talks about his plan to bring his family back together in Carol's house. He says, "It's beautiful, isn't it?"
This black shard, yeah.
As to how he plans on using the Black Shard, we don't know. Surely, though, he's referring to a shadow crystal, right? Well, no. In the 1225 Gunball Machine secret, you find a small dark triangle that slips through your hand. Surely this is a shadow crystal, right? Well, again, no, because the shadow crystals are supposedly translucent. And it's very important, if you defeat the Night on top of getting a shadow crystal, you also get a chip from its blade called the Black Shard. So that's 3 Black Shard references, and one of them that specifically differentiates it from the shadow crystals. The Black Shard is a very unique item, seeing that it produces a unique effect when using it in battle. It's the only weapon Chris can equip that has a unique icon rather than the generic sword icon. And most importantly, it's the only item in the game that has the same name in both the Dark and Light worlds. So let me get this straight.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A piece from the Night that is ultra powerful, supposedly tied to December in some way, and doesn't change forms between the Dark and Light worlds? Well then, it seems we've solved it. The Night is made of these black shards, which allows them to exist throughout the Dark and Light worlds. But then again, there are still problems with this theory. Most importantly, what does that mean for December? That she's some sort of walking crystal sarcophagus, crudely reanimating a dead reindeer? I think it's safe to say that the Night isn't some mindless monster either. It clearly has goals and plans. It's cocky, it's rude, it's careful of when to attack versus not attack, and is clearly working with Chris in some way. It literally knights them after the battle, and during the battle, if you manage to no-hit the knight, Chris and the knight have a sort of silent communication where they're trying to tell it to end the battle, because we're totally winning. This makes it hard for me to believe it's as simple as zombie death theory suggests. There has to be some middle ground between reanimated mindless corpse deaths and totally fine, perfectly alive December holiday.
Again, like, it's one of those things, like, as I've kind of learned, it seems like potentially the knight is trying to, like, either change or circumvent the prophecy to their own goals, or whoever the knight's working with, or whoever it works. I don't know how the hierarchy here is going. Because as Rouse said, if the prophecy is broken, it will find a way to get back on track. So it seems like the knight, or whoever's doing it, like, is trying to push things without breaking them, essentially. Because, like, as we saw at the very beginning of the game, we were making our own vessel, the vessel made of human parts for the soul, and then we were just pulled out of that and stuck into Chris, another vessel made of human parts. And then we start hanging around with a girl, Susie, who may or may not be the girl from the legend, which most likely may have been Noelle. So, like, is the knight and whoever's working with them trying to, like, have the prophecy be fulfilled in their own, like, for their own benefit, while not technically breaking it or something like that? Gonna have to see.
There's also another issue at hand, literally. The knight has several parallels to Chris, like, way too many to write off as coincidence. Not only has Chris been called the Roaring Knight, and not only have they seemingly been instructed on where to open the next fountain, or what the next fountain is.
Wow, okay. We're just being that blatant now, are we, Toby? Okay.
They do the same poses, they have that moment where they seemingly push hands up against each other, and in the Shadow Mantle minigame, there's a moment where Chris and this black deer are on the opposite sides of the board, and moving one controls the other in parallel. So what's going on? Well, I'd like to suggest a different answer. I mean, there really is no way to ease into this next idea, so I'm just going to come out and say it. It's a rough idea, theory, thing that I've been thinking about.
What is it?
What if Chris did kill December? Probably on accident. This night we see isn't December at all. It's a Darkener brought back from her memories, in the same way that Gerson was brought back in Chapter 4's Second Dark World. It's not exactly her. How could this work? Wouldn't there need to be a dust-covered object that had Dess's remnants? Well, yes, and there is. Remember how I suggested that the Black Shard is what the knight and its weapon are made of? Well, get this. The description for the Black Shard is a dagger-like shard of the Black Knife. The knight's theme is called Black Knife. The prophecy states the knight will make with blackened knife. Is it possible that the knight is the Darkener version of Chris's knife? That Susie herself asks if they carry around all the time? That the Black Knife is the knight with Dess's dust on it? Now, technically speaking, this makes no sense, but thinking about it for a second, well, it still makes very little sense. Okay, I admit that this is a total stretch, but considering the weird Chris Knight hand-knife symbolism, I think that there's gotta be some, metaphysical connection between Chris and the knight.
I mean, I could definitely see something like that, but the thing is, again, we see the knight leave the Dark World with it somehow potentially able to keep its form in the Light World. So it can't be like a Darkener, or it can't be like a true Darkener, so to speak. So, while that would be cool, I don't think it would be the knight, though.
That we just don't know of yet. There is a popular alternative to Death Knight, though I think it's pretty easy to debunk at this point. Carol Knight. Technically speaking, this is the one that the game seems to be pushing on you. Carol has a massive katana, and we know the knight has a big sword. Carol speaks weirdly over the phone, and seems to be a major antagonist, given how she and Chris are plotting together. Mm-hmm. And one more thing. After closing the church Dark World, we can examine a closet in the upper right-hand side of the room. Like in Chapter 2, the closet is big enough to fit a large person
door,
inside.
A large person.
Chris refuses to open the door, possibly because someone was hiding within. This only makes sense if it's the knight, which again doesn't make total sense to be December. Therefore, there is a foundation for Carol Knight to be believed. But not so fast. First off, there's not enough time for Carol to have gotten to the church, as we leave her house and go straight there while she's still home. Similarly, this cutscene is not Carol talking to Chris from a dark world or in her night form. Cell phones don't work in the dark world.
Yeah.
Wherever Carol was in this scene, she's in the light world. Personally, I think Carol was in her house the entire time, in the secret "let's all search for December" room that Asgore is clearly in this hidden cutscene. Asgore does, after all, seem to be talking to an old friend. Obviously, the only answer as to who this could be, if not Rudy, which is a whole other can of worms, is...
Well, again, but, like, Rudy is still in the hospital. But actually, no way, he was in church. No, yeah, he goes directly back to the hospital after church. Right.
Carol. So no, I don't think Carol is the Knight, though I do think she's obviously working with Chris and the Knight. It's here that I think we need to sort of lay down our cards and identify exactly how we're feeling here. No, Chris is not single-handedly the Knight, but they are working with it. I've accepted that I'm taking a fat L on Chris Knight, even though, technically speaking, the logic behind it still holds up.
Yeah.
Carol is not the Knight, though she, too, is working with it. December Holiday or some physical remnant left behind by her is, by all means, most likely the Knight, at least its physical form. While December is most likely not alive and well in the basic sense, the Knight in both its design and in its smaller details is clearly tied to her. Now, we have established this sort of trio that's working together, but what can we actually say about the dynamic? This is clearly not three friends ghoulishly rubbing their hands together and cackling at their evil plans.
That would be really funny if that actually was the case. Like, they were just being, like, evil in the back rooms or something.
Seen some suggest that Chris is actually reluctantly following along. They clearly don't like the soul's intrusion in their daily life, so why are they going along with this plan? Well, combining our knowledge that Chris has something in the past related to violence or using their knife they still feel guilty about, paired with the fact that in Carol's last phone conversation with Chris, she says, "Don't forget, Chris, you promised." Many have suggested that Chris is reluctantly following along as they're being blackmailed by Carol. There isn't any strong evidence for this yet, besides Carol saying, "Don't forget, you promised," and sort of stretching that to mean it's some sort of blackmail situation. One thing we do know about these three is that they all have been to the bunker. Carol knows the code, Chris knows the code, and followed the Knight inside after Chapter 3, so this seems to be pretty simple. Carol, Chris, and the Knight, regardless of whether it is an amicable relationship, are working together towards some common goal. Though there must be two things brought up. One, December wrote down the code to the shelter on the inside of her guitar. The shelter has never had a clear answer, though, like so many other mysteries, the answer has always existed in the minds of the fanbase in a vague, amorphous blob state. Originally, everyone unanimously agreed it was something Gaster, something laboratory.
Again, like, I still miss my old like joke theory. Like, one of the very first ones I came up with was the fact that Gaster would be busted, like, because he owed like years worth of property tax and hadn't been paying it down properly. Oh, I miss when that kind of stupidness could work. They go an Al Capone Gaster.
Something super darkness depths hole. That was a pretty good answer until Chapter 4, in which it turns out everyone is actually cautiously aware of the shelter and won't go anywhere near it, except for high-ranking officials within the town, as well as Chris and the Knight. Clearly, there's a dark world inside the shelter. So now the shelter has become something keep December alive-inator, something super secret evil Chris Carol Knight hideout, something darkness depths hole, but now with Undyne held captive. I still think this is obviously not a very good answer, considering December wrote down the code in her guitar. For December to write the code inside her guitar secret like that, which has clearly been kept in the closet in a room nobody dared touch for years, it means that either she was investigating it and wanted to remember the code, or she wanted someone else to find it. I'd wager that she wanted Noelle to find the code. But wait, why would December write the code to the shelter in her guitar before she turned into the Knight? Well, clearly there must be more to the shelter than just being the Knight's hidey hole.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is a dark world in there, so we have no idea what the inside's like. But I mean, it doesn't look that big. So either what's inside is not that big, but still very important, or it's like an actual bunker and it goes like very, very deep underground. Or honestly, there's just so much about it.
I'd wager that there's another element at play here, that the Chris Carol Knight connection goes way deeper. Question: Remember how one of the big points against Chris being the knight was that the library fountain must have just been opened because Ralsei, quote-unquote, sensed a dark presence and would never lie about that kind of thing? Well, explain why he hasn't mentioned that dark presence. He has to be aware of the bunker dark world. Not only that, but there's also the new big theory about the end of Chapter 3. If you defeat the knight, it starts to freak out and something strange happens. A slash comes not from the right, but from the left side of the screen, and Susie is downed.
Oh god. Could Chris have been the one that swooned them? Oh no.
Ralsei turns not to the knight, but to Chris and asks, "How could you?" before being cut down as well. The knight then knights Chris. The theory here, of course, being Chris slash theory, aka Chris was the one to slash at Susie and Ralsei at the end of the fight because the knight was unable to beat the soul. I see your problems with this already. Specifically, if Ralsei knew Chris attacked Susie, how could he be okay with it? Well, again, I ask you, if he wanted to steal all the dark fountains, why has he been okay with the bunker fountain being opened? I'd actually go as far as to suggest that with his magic teleportation powers, he might have even joined Chris in the bunker at the end of Chapter 3. Not only that, but in the same way Chris was the one who gave Tenna specific instructions on what he was supposed to do, as evidenced by the tiny 8-bit Tenna's dialogue in the sword route, I bet that Chris gave explicit instructions to Ralsei as well. I'd be willing to bet that the reason that Ralsei knows so much and isn't able to talk about it, like he says in Chapter 4, is because of Chris or Carol. After all, the soul is no longer a Gaster-specific experiment. Carol knows about it, as well as how it works. She knows what it is and how to utilize it. This brings me to my last point about the Chris-Carol Knight team-up. If there was something in the bunker, something that Des wanted to warn others about or wanted to investigate herself before her eventual disappearance, what could it be? Well, have you stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, Gaster is involved in all this as well?
Of course he is!
I know, I'm always the guy to say, actually, Gaster's behind it all, but just...
Okay, actually, wait a second. I just thought of something. So, playing off that whole thing about... So, continuing off on the thought that, it's like, Ralsei might know that Chris is, working with the knight and stuff like that. Actually, thinking about that does make a lot of sense, because, again, all those times about when, like, about when they send the soul away and Chris and Ralsei talk while we're not looking at them. Like, if Chris really does, not want us controlling them, maybe, again, that's Ralsei purposely saying, it's like, hey, it's going to be okay, this is why you have to do this. That sort of deal. Like, trying... But as an extension of that, oh god, if it turned out that Ralsei actually was working, Susie would be crushed. She would be absolutely crushed and angry. Very angry. So I have to ask, can you imagine... Actually, wait. So I remember there's been like a couple of speculations here and there where people, I can't tell whether it's been serious or not, but they've joked about, like, if you continue the weird route, eventually we just control Noelle. Like, a soul goes into Noelle, we control them, and something funky goes on there. But can you imagine if, in the normal route, when this happens, when or if Susie finds out that not only Chris, but, Ralsei are potentially working with the knight and been doing things there, she's crushed, and that one thing leads to another, and then eventually we end up controlling Susie, or trying to, probably would be more like it. Because, again, like, we're also being used here. What if we get the chance to leave Chris and join Susie if she runs away at some point? Can you imagine how panicked stuff would be, where, like, you have Carol the Knight, it's like, some grand reveal has happened, now we know information we're not supposed to, and then we just run, because we're not going to be used as one of those tools anymore, and it's us and Susie. I don't know how that would work, whether, like, Susie would have to allow us to control her, or if it would be some sort of thing where we're just kind of, like, going along for the ride, and we're, like, allowed to do stuff every once in a while. Honestly, again, knowing Susie, it would probably be the latter, but, oh god, that would be weird. Wait a second, I need...
Hear me out. Carol's plan requires the soul. We know this based on her phone call. The only reason the soul exists is because of Gaster. Now, you could suggest that originally, the soul Chris used was their own, and didn't rebel against them, therefore Gaster is not a mandatory part of the equation, but that would be wrong, as if that was the case and Chris was one unified being, they would have no reason to ever take the soul out of their body.
And also, then how would we get here?
Only reason they do so is to hide their plans and actions from us, meaning the only way Carol's plan exists is if Gaster exists, is if he summons us to Deltarune. So now there are two possible answers here. A. Gaster has his own plan, his own goals, but the second voice that interrupts the beginning of the game, the one that chooses to put us into Chris rather than the vessel, is Carol. Chris, and the Knight's plan goes directly against Gaster's plan, as it requires us to be in Chris rather than the vessel.
Yeah.
Or option B. Gaster is working with Chris, Carol, and the Knight, and they're all part of the same equation. There's actually some logic behind this. We know that the Knight has Gaster parallels, specifically the holes in its hand. We have accepted at this point that Gaster is in control of our visual experience to some degree. Most people, myself included, I think it's also part of Molly Star's device theory and more, all agree that the soul or the Deltarune executable in some way was created by Gaster. Our experience shaped by Gaster. What we see versus what we can't see chosen by Gaster. The window names are written by Gaster, the sound effects and music is sometimes Gaster, so if that's the case and we know that Chris and Carol are knowledgeable about the soul needing to be taken out, or else it'll find out about their plans, how did Chris know that they could enter the shelter without removing the soul? That doesn't necessarily make much sense, unless they knew that it was a sort of safe zone.
Yeah, unless they knew, oh hey, this is going to be a natural stopping point as Chapter 3 is literally about to finish. You don't have to worry about us watching there because we're physically not going to be able to.
That the chapter would end. Knowledge only available to, presumably, Gaster. If we are to assume that there was something in the bunker prior to Dessa's disappearance, something she tried warning others about, we cannot forget that the sound that plays in this room is a slowed down Gaster sound effect. Therefore, Gaster is also in the bunker. I think it's safe to say that there are going to be at least two forces in opposition to each other by the end of the story. The illusion of the path we're on now, the heroes versus the Knight and the forces of darkness, has been completely shattered. The only character in the entire story, at the end of the day, who is actually in opposition to the Knight is Susie. I don't believe that Carol, the Knight, or Chris will be evil, or even villainized in any major way outside of a late-game boss fight or two. I do think we'll have a round 2 Knight fight, but outside of Loose Mother 3 Parallels, I don't think that it'll be the final boss fight. I think that the true goals of the Knight are beyond causing the roaring. At this point, I don't even think we understand the roaring. I still think that World's Edge and Angel's Heaven are going to be relevant in ways beyond our current understanding. Remember, one of the prophecies claims that the angel, banished, will finally meet with its desire. That doesn't sound like the very end of the game to me. I get that I'm probably starting to lose you with the, well, to me that sounds weird, or that seems wrong, so let me elaborate. I do not see a future in which Gaster is not a major player by the end. It's clear that prior to December's death, there was some force or existence that she wanted someone to be warned about, or that she was investigating herself, that existed within the bunker. Hell and Heaven have been referenced way more frequently than before, with Chapter 4 openly stating that lost where the forest should grow, the children followed the pointed tail, the poor children. Following that, we hear in a prophecy that they'll see the tail of Hell take crawl. However, we also see that they'll hear the ring of Heaven's call. These two prophecies are meant to stand in contrast to each other. So the question becomes, who is who? Who exactly represents Heaven, and who exactly represents Hell? Originally, I stated that all religious illusions will eventually be linked back to one individual, whoever is in control of the story, whether that be Gaster acting like a game developer laying out the course ahead, or us, the player, the one with the ability to bring it all about. That the angel and the creature from Hell are both the same thing. However, I don't believe that any longer. There are explicit mentions of something from Hell and something from Heaven. So then, what am I getting at? I guess my point is, I don't think the Knight is the true villain. There's something else, something deeper, something that has a pointed tail, or something that is called the Tail of Hell. I know some of you would like to say that it isn't Gaster, despite the frequent references to the number 666 throughout Undertale, so sure, maybe there's a totally different Hell-related character who will eventually act as the primary antagonist of Deltarune.
Again, talking about tail, the only thing I can think of is like the Jevil tail you get from his boss fight. but I have no idea how that would work, because like currently, like apart from that one like Easter egg scene you can get in Chapter 3 where Spanton comes out of your inventory to talk to Tenna for a bit before Tenna sprays him with a like a fire extinguisher. Like, the secret bosses really haven't come back at all. Like, they don't even appear in, like, Castletown at all. So it can't be with them.
Maybe it's Mike the Cat. Some of you would like that.
Mike the Cat.
Evil, dastardly Mike the Cat did it all, because he's evil and Gaster's a silly old man. I'm being slightly sarcastic, because I get the sense that whenever I suggest Gaster might be a villain in any of my videos, the comments tend to roll their eyes and say things about how he's a clearly uncaring scientist who wants to see how things go.
I mean, could it be Mike the Cat? We already have Mike the Cat, or a cat named Mike, you know?
Despite that being the least interesting answer possible, and there being multiple references to hell and heaven at this point. It's also possible that I'm reading into it too much, and that the thing from hell isn't some evil Satan final boss, but is instead, there's some deeper meaning. But we know that there are references to hell and heaven. We don't necessarily know what they mean. Is the depths hell? Is the depths meant to be heaven? Is the light world meant to be heaven? Is our world meant to be heaven? I mean, I guess technically speaking, if heaven is the uppermost, floor, then our world would be heaven. We'd be the angel. We're from heaven. We're from a place where everything is real. Compared to the depths, which would be more like hell, which is the deepest layer, right underneath
where nothing is real.
The genetic makeup of the fictional world exists, I guess. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe we're the angel and Gaster's the devil. Maybe there you go. Gaster is the tail of hell, whatever that means. That's all tied to Gaster because he's in hell. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that Gaster will be the capital V villain, but there's clearly something beyond the Knight and the Titans. We've already beaten a Titan. The final boss fight won't be more Titans. We also have so much more ground to cover when it comes to backstory outside of December. Chris is...
Unless, okay, I'm just going to be spitballing here for something really stupid. Can you imagine if the last battle is going to be like a version of like the Giga Queen fight where you have like the giants fighting giants, but it's actually like Giant Chris, Giant Susie, Giant Rousey fighting, each of them fighting a giant or a Titan. I mean, that'd be really stupid, but that would be so funny. Only question is how would they get giant in the first place?
Weird childhood stuff, the art therapy, whatever ERAM suggests happened with their violent tendencies, the hell and heaven stuff, Rousey backstory, whatever happened prior to Des turning into the Knight, and more. I don't think that the Knight is the final challenge, especially when half of our party is working together with them in some way.
More than half, yeah.
Knowledgeable about the other person in our party working together with them in some way. There's got to be more to this story. Anyways, sorry to get off track. I don't necessarily have a point to the rambling, but I don't feel like I can really cut it out because, there's important discussion to be had about this topic, and I just want to give my thoughts out there. So, discuss below. Gun to my head, I guess my theory would be that considering Gerson mentioned that there was never a 7th story written, even though there needed to be, at the end of Chapter 6, we'll fight the Knight, get banished, meet with, presumably, Gaster, and then have to go off on some side tangent to unlock Chapter 7, either through post-game exploration of previous chapters, the weird route, or it's not necessarily something we have to do on our own, and there's a sort of Homestuck-esque intermission that takes place in the depths where some non-Gaster character helps us access Chapter 7. I don't know, at this point it's way too vague to know for sure. So, to recap, I know, I've gone off, I'm recapping, okay? If you lost me, here's the recap. Chris, Carol, and the Knight are working together. Carol has some knowledge of the soul, and they may be working with Gaster or some knowledge left behind by Gaster, though that's just speculation. December is the Knight in some way, and it probably was caused by whatever is inside the shelter. Prior to her death, we know she was investigating it, and possibly wanted someone to find the code she hid in her guitar. Rousey is also probably much more knowledgeable about the Knight's ongoing activities than we think.
Well, again, Rousey specifically says that they know the entire prophecy. They just don't want to say it. So, given that we've literally seen a section of the prophecy talk about Lancer saying, toothpaste and boy, and that Tenna was going to be killed, or, at the very least slashed and stuff like that, I wouldn't be surprised if the prophecy didn't have, like, a point-for-point list of everything that's going to go down. So Rousey literally, basically, essentially has, future sight here. He's just not willing to say anything.
Based on the Chris Slash theory, if you believe that, and the fact that he hasn't commented on the Shelter Dark World. So that's the Knight. I don't think it's enough to suggest that December is, like, from Mother 3, as she's clearly not sentient, and the tragic thing that happened at the holidays is her disappearance specifically, not some other event she's struggling to cope with. You know, that's actually something I'd like to touch on real quick. Lots of people think that the final boss is actually going to be just like the aforementioned game because, oh, it's going to be a sad fight against December where, you know, we get over the dramatic problem. But what was December's problem? Like, all of the characters' problems seem to be either caused by something in their past or December herself.
I mean, admittedly, December's problem might be the fact that she's dead. For all we know, she might just be a very vengeful ghost or the equivalent of something like that hasn't come to terms with her own death and has unfinished business. Actually, think about it. That might be why the Knight has so many weird powers. It's a darker version of a ghost. Like of a ghost, not a monster ghost.
We can safely assume that Carol, Asgore, and Noelle's major trauma was caused by December's disappearance, and there's a high chance that whatever is going on with Chris and the backstory and the art therapy is also tied to December. So, like, what happened to December? I mean, December, again, is not really a fleshed out character at this point, and that's not an insult. It's just a fact. She's the Knight. She's just a big villain that we don't know much about.
Which, you know, that being said, at the same time, that is more than we had. I remember specifically, like, I came across a couple of conversations or people talking where the people were arguing whether Dess's name would ever actually be said in game. Like, it was going to be one of those things where, like, oh, we get allusions to her, like, from that one section, Chapter 2, where you're walking with Noelle, and Noelle's walking over the buttons with letters, or stuff like that. Or you see the Birdley flashback where Noelle is having trouble spelling the word December. Like, a lot of people were assuming that we were going to have something like that where December, like, oh, something happened to her, but nobody was ever actually going to say anything. So the fact, like, in chapters 9 and, 3 and 4, we have actual people talking about her, like, just in general, that's a major step up.
So my point is, I don't think that we could just fight the Knight and, like, get over it, because it's like, oh yeah, something unfair and messed up happened to December. There was no, like, okay, Mother 3 spoilers. Skip to this point if you want to avoid the Mother 3 spoilers, okay? I'm gonna spoil Mother 3. Okay, so the masked man that, you know, you fight throughout the game, that you fight earlier in the game and then as the final boss, is your brother Klaus. However, the reason that Klaus is the masked man is specifically as, and I'm super summarizing here, so don't go in the comments and tell me, you're wrong, Spooky Dude, you don't get Mother 3. I didn't play Mother 3, buddy. I have... Never mind. But
I have
Klaus
Wikipedia.
becomes the masked man is in an attempt to kind of shove his emotions down after what happened to his mother. She died. And so he kind of tries to repress all of those feelings and all of those emotions and becomes this emotionless husk of a person, you know, created by the pig masks, so he's the masked man. And it's like, oh, that's sad, but in the final fight, like, you appeal to his emotions, he sort of comes out of that masked man persona, and then, like, he gets over it and he dies by his own hand, because of, you know, like it's like, okay, you've overcome that emotional blockage with Klaus, but Des doesn't have that. It wasn't like, oh, you know, the thing that happened was so sad that Des became the Knight to cope with it. Des became the Knight seemingly on accident. You know, with Des writing the code down to the shelter, and I mean, come on, we can probably assume that whatever it was in the shelter turned her into the Knight. It's like she wasn't, like, you know, sad and emotional and something pulled her under and it's like, oh, this is a stand-in for her repressing her emotions. No, some kind of demon from hell turned her into the Knight.
Which again points towards, like, maybe it's not all of Des, like it's only a part of Des, and I don't know, like, the good part is the part that's, like, stuck in the game's code or something like that. I mean, who knows? I mean, again, the whole thing of Noelle having a habit of finding game glitches while she herself lives in a world that is, in fact, a computer game. Again, we might be able to find something. I mean, who knows? Maybe her habit of finding game glitches is because it's related to Des somehow.
I don't think it's going to be like, sorry, Des, you died. We've got to just get over you. It's an unfair death, right? And, I can't believe I'm going to say a Homestuck thing here, but in Homestuck, one of the things is like, oh, if you're God tier, you can only die if it's a just death, or if if you're a just death, or is it if you're a villain? I don't remember, but it's like, oh, if you're a villain, or if you are, it's a just death, or, hold on, I'm going to look this up. Hold on, 1 second.
See, this is the kind of stuff I usually cut out.
Yes, okay, I looked it up. God tiers in Homestuck can only die through a heroic or just death. And I don't necessarily feel like... I kind of feel like that's a good rule for most characters in fiction, where, typically people aren't just written off randomly. Like, oh yeah, sorry buddy, you died. If someone has something unjust happen to them, it's like, we're not gonna kill you. We're gonna somehow get your win back. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a version of A Christmas Carol where it's like, wow, Scrooge is a very bad person. Let's kill him. But instead, it's like, no, there's two sides to that equation.
That's a weird one. Is
that
true?
Bad man, and then you're like, oh, the ending is so positive, and he's just the best person ever. I want to go hang out with ending Scrooge. And it's like, there's the pendulum. You go back and forth. So it's like, oh, something very tragic and bad and unjust happened to December Holiday. Do we just, kill her? Go away. You're in the night now, so we want nothing to do with you. No, that just doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's gonna be, we fight the night, the story comes undone. We find out, Susie finds out what's going on. Chris, you're working with the night. I never trusted you. And oh, you've got this soul. And oh, the final act gang splits up, Pixar movie ass storyline. And then it's like, oh, by the way, while you're going through this storyline, here's some lore about how this all happened. And then we all get back together and we're like, wait a minute, we're the Deltarune, we got to go fight the true monsters that caused this super evil devil Hellgaster. Anyway, sorry for the super ramble there.
Why did you give him a name like he was a Dragon Ball Z villain? I don't like the thought of Dragon Ball Z Gaster.
I'm sorry, but I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. Because when I say clearly the knight won't be the final boss, someone's gonna say, actually, I think the knight might be the final boss, considering the power scaling of it all. And it's like, well, buddy, no. I don't think so. And, I've never been wrong. Moving on, let's talk about Chapter 5. As with what happened in Chapter 3, the fanbase has moved on to figuring out what will happen in Chapter 5. Overall, most theories are pretty similar. We know that in Chapter 4 there's a prophecy panel that reads, the Flower Man trapped in asylum, showing Asgore with a crown like an undertale holding a flower. Secondly, in Gerson's recap...
It's weird. I'm looking... Oh, wait, no, yeah, there is a flower. Okay, yeah, because I was going to say, like, man, it kind of looks weird. Like, are those, the shoulder pads from his cape, or are those axes? But no, I literally, completely forgot about the flower in the center there.
Of the Lord of the Hammer, he says, Chapter 5, the fields of pink and gold, the vast garden is charred in a fiery inferno of jealousy. The theory is simple. Chapter 5 is going to be in Asgore's flower shop. I agree with this, completely, but pushing further a bit, there's more to be said. First off, there's no way to know for sure if the garden will actually be set on fire. Gerson's explanation of Chapter 3 and 4 aren't entirely accurate, so for all we know, the vast garden might not be charred in a fiery inferno at all.
I just had a thought. If the garden does get charred, I could see one of two possibilities as to why that happens. I mean, again, we have no idea how... we're at this point, fairly certain that, with the monsters going in the Dark World have, similar, at the very least, powers as they did in Undertale. Again, I point towards Undyne with the spears and all that. So the two ways I could see the field going up in flame would potentially be maybe from Asgore himself, because, fire magic, or maybe Toriel. Can you imagine, after everything that happened in Chapter 3, with Toriel just being asleep the entire time, Chapter 5 happens, and, maybe Toriel has finally had enough of Asgore, doing his thing, and finally decides to go over to his house and his shop to actually talk to him about it. And, put her foot down, and when she gets there, Dark World in the shop, she gets either, pushed in or goes in thinking the place is on fire or something to save Asgore, Dark World, and then something involves with her lighting the flowers, the field of flowers on fire. Interesting. Oh, that's gonna... Ooh. Wait a second, I have another theory!
That being said, I do think we know who the boss of this chapter is. Asgore. The file name of the Queen-related prophecy is Prophecy Boss 1. The file name for the Tenno one is Prophecy Boss 2. The file name for the Asgore one is Prophecy Boss 3. Meaning that something in this image is going to be the boss of Chapter 5. Now, obviously, this is going to be Asgore, right? Well,
oh god, if it's the flower. If it's the flower and we get like a knockoff version of Flowey, oh god.
there's always the chance we get something else. See, in Jackenstein's maze, we have to navigate this grid-based board to collect a key and then return. On the grid are these random symbols. In order, they are a small crown meant to represent the king piece in chess, a queen's crown, a knight, a bishop, and then a flower. There's also a sword to the side. Considering we fight the king, queen, then knight, and then chapter 4 is set at the church, so the bishop has some relevance, could this mean that it's not Asgore that's the boss of chapter 5, it's the little flower he's holding? After all, the prophecies all have something to do with what's going on in the Dark World, and there's no sign of Asgore being trapped in Asylum yet. Could this little flower, I don't know, hold Asgore captive? Who knows? I'd much prefer an Asgore fight, considering the amount of potential in a new Asgore fight, versus another Flowey-based fight that surely wouldn't reach the excitement of Omega Flowey.
God, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see it. I mean, like, if, you know, Deltarune is being used to fill in some of the holes in Undertale, you know, specifically with us being able to see, you know, like, let's just see Gerson, you know, actually, like, in fighting shape and stuff like that. I mean, I'd love to see a fight with Asgore where we actually fight him, you know, seriously. Instead of him being all mopey and depressed.
Although it would be cool to maybe see a version of Asgore powered up by the 7 flowers, like an idea of what 7 Soul Asgore would have looked like. I'm just spitballing, but I think it's safe to say that Asgore's flower shop is confirmed, as is Asgore playing a major role in the chapter. Now, as for the secret boss, we really have no way of knowing. Chapter 3's secret boss wasn't really a secret boss at all. Similarly, Chapter 4's secret boss was a character within the regular story. At this point, I feel like it's not so much about secret bosses anymore as it is the shadow crystals. The question isn't so much who is the secret boss as much as it is who will guard the shadow crystal of this chapter. Now let's get the obvious out of the way. Woody is up there as a potential secret boss candidate. As crazy as this sounds, there is reason to believe that Woody Theory is not as dead as you think. For more information on that, go check out my last video, Woody Theory 2.
I also did a reaction to that one, so if I remember correctly, I'll put a card to that in the corner.
Which goes over the entire thing. However, assuming it's not Woody, there is, again, no way of knowing. Although, I have seen an idea floating around Twitter for the last few days. If you speak to the Forgotten Man in Chapter 3, he tells you his schedule. On Thursday, I go to sell the donuts. On Friday, I toss the leftovers in the dumpster. On Saturday, I let it cool on the windowsill. On Sunday, I harvest the wheat. What is he talking about? Well, the things he says correlate to where he is on any given chapter. First he's by the bake sale, then the dumpster, then in the window, so he's going to be harvesting the wheat in Chapter 5. More confirmation for Asgore's flower shop, but it also opens the door to another interesting possibility. Consider for 1 second Spamton's warning against the enemy that uses death/scythe. What tool is used for harvesting wheat?
A scythe. Okay.
A scythe. What if the Forgotten Man is going to be the secret boss of Chapter 5, and use a scythe? I think you could take this theory pretty far, especially due to the similarities between the overall speech pattern of the Forgotten Man seeming very similar to the River Person who looks like the Grim Reaper, but, you know, anything beyond this is sort of baseless speculation. I'd like to think more about Chapter 5 and do a full predictions video a little later, but for now I think this is enough. Asgore's flower shop, boss fight with Asgore, a flower, or both. Eggman will be there, possibly as a secret boss.
I completely forgot when you said Eggman. I pictured the one from Sonic. God, wouldn't that be like out completely on the left field?
Only time will tell. Moving on, let's talk about Mike. I don't even know where to begin. Let's summarize the cat Mike theory. In the Spamton sweepstakes, Noelle talks about a rare cat you can obtain in the Cat Pedders 2 game she played. It was an egg that never hatched. It left, and she couldn't remember the name. These 2 eyes appear throughout the sweepstakes as well as in Spamton's shop, and because they're loosely tied to RNG, many believe that they were the special cat Noelle mentioned. The theory grew, and with numerous mentions of a character called Mike, many believe that Mike was this face, and was also a cat. Sort of a number of hints rolled up into one bowl. If you want more on the Cat Mike theory, there are so many better places to go see it summarized. Just look up Cat Mike theory Deltarune. Then chapters 3 and 4 came out. First off, the face was shown immediately. Image_friend was featured in the chapter 3 intro scene, where we saw this cat-like creature emerge with the face from the darkness.
The cat-like version of endogamy.
Then, in the ERAM boss fight, we see several creatures with this face. It's also hidden in the Chapter 4 Dark World, and there's a hidden room in the Mantle minigame where the Friend smile is there. That's pretty much all that happened with Friend. With Mike, however, there was a bit more. Tenna referenced Mike throughout the entire chapter. Mike was an off-screen character who basically acted as a stagehand, controlling the show and doing whatever Tenna wanted. We never see Mike, but in the Mike room in Castletown, we fight these guys who reveal that nobody actually knows who Mike is. These three have been standing in for Mike for who knows how long. Is there even a real Mike? Well, at the end of the room, after beating the fight, you find a real Mike.
Again, Toby, you absolute troll. We found the real Mike.
The only actual information on Mike we get is that Tenna claims after Spamton left, Mike acted differently. If you ask me, I don't think Mike is going to be super important. It's clear that his backstory is directly tied to Tenna and Spamton, so for him to be this super lore-relevant image_friend thing is unlikely. I think there's also a chance that Spamton was Mike. The reason that Spamton is so weird about Mike is because that was his name, and the reason Tenna says Mike acted differently when he left is because the other three fake Mikes took over. Although that is still a bit of a stretch. I guess that Mike could theoretically return, however I don't really think he's going to be that important. The Mike room feels like Toby's way of doing Mike, giving the fanbase what they want, and also sort of saying, this is what Mike is.
Mike is a joke.
And now for some rapid-fire theories regarding these last few chapters.
Oh, here we go.
The Chapter 4 Weird Route and the red thing growing inside Noelle. It's definitely a soul, and we're probably going to control her at some point in the future. Des hit by a car theory. No, I highly doubt that.
God, the memes. The memes!
I get it's funny, but unlikely. Rudy Knight. Okay, this one I think has lots of potential, but just doesn't make sense when you look at all the Death Knight evidence. It would be a pretty exciting twist, but only for the sake of it being a twist.
Yeah.
Regarding Sans, it's clear that he's slowly becoming more relevant and sort of inserting himself into Chris's life. Is he doing it specifically to get close to Chris? Possibly, but unlikely. Is he a terrible womanizing scumbag like Reddit seems to think all of a sudden for some reason? No, I don't think so. Is this clearly the beginning of his attachment tutorial in the Deltarune universe, an attachment that'll get stomped on and destroyed once he actually is a major part of the story and gets banished to the Undertale universe? Yes.
So one of my previous reactions I watched previously to this went over this exact thing very well. Again, if I remember, I'll put it in the top left corner. But it's how Deltarune kind of relates back to Undertale by Artsy. And again, very good video.
Another thing some people think is that Papyrus could be the Forgotten Man. No, that just seems unnecessary. But I guess it would be interesting and cool if done right. That being said, I just don't see it being done at all. Why wouldn't Papyrus be able to talk except for the Game Boy world? That makes no sense. Okay, I think I got through most of it. At the moment, these are kind of the biggest theories in the Deltarune community. I'm really looking forward to Chapter 5, which is literally only a year away. And when I say a year away, I get that technically it could release late December 2026. But even so, the last 5 or 6 months before Chapters 3 and 4 were like a big extended party.
Man, can you imagine if, just to mess with everybody, that Toby releases Deltarune Chapter 5 on December 25th, literally Christmas Day, 12/25. Or alternatively, can you imagine if he released it on another day and the date it was released actually corresponded to another one of the codes we needed to open up the door?
The second that New Year's hits, we're on the clock. Deltarune could theoretically release at any moment.
When it's New Year's time once again, Deltarune tomorrow.
For that reason, I want to try and get as many videos out as possible, because this time is going to fly by before you know it. I hope you'd enjoyed this one. If you have any other big theories that the community is talking about that I haven't seen, please send them to me and maybe I'll do another one like this. Maybe in the future I'll also make a standalone video on any of the topics I covered. For all you know, I might be secretly cooking up a Papyrus's Eggman theory. But no, for real, I'm not. I would, though, like to do a proper Chapter 5 predictions video, another video on Chris and Carol and Des, and more. So thank you for watching. Next week, I'm going to be doing another theory review, so please send your theories to spookydudetheories@gmail.com for the chance to be included. I'd also like to remind you that I have a new channel called Spooky Vision that I am going to be uploading videos to very soon. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Spooky Dude, and
Again, like, all the ideas, like, I love that out of all the things, I love the fact that Woody Theory is still alive after everything that's happened. Like, out of all the ideas that could have survived the releases of chapters 3 and 4, even when, you know, there was nothing related to, well, a little bit of things, but nothing major related to cowboys at all. Oh, God. Honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I look forward to every moment of it. So yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.